All right, so we're diving into 30 Days in Atlanta today. And, I think everyone knows this movie is just flat out hilarious.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But we're going to try to go a little deeper than that today and look at, why this Nigerian American rom-com just blew up back in 2014. Like what made it such a phenomenon. We've got articles and reviews and box office data and even some cultural commentary to dig into. So
sounds fun.
Yeah, should be interesting. So you ready to get into it?
Absolutely. I think what's really fascinating about this film is how it, connected with audiences on so many different levels. It blends humor and social commentary, but it also has a lot of heart.
Yeah, for sure.
It wasn't just funny, it really had something to say.
Okay, well, let's jump into it. The movie starts off with Akpos, our, mischievous protagonist winning a trip to Atlanta.
Right.
He brings his cousin Richard along for the ride. And it's just like, from the moment they land in Atlanta, it's just this whirlwind of cultural clashes and just comedic mayhem.
Yeah, like that scene where Akpos tries to haggle the price of groceries. It's that classic fish out of water comedy, but it also, I think, really cleverly points out the differences in cultural norms and expectations.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm curious about, when you mentioned stereotypes earlier, do you think the film relies too heavily on stereotypes, or does it kind of like use the humor to flip those stereotypes on their head?
That's a great question. I think the film definitely plays with stereotypes, especially around Akpos's, a really outgoing personality, and then Richard's more reserved demeanor. But I think it kind of makes those stereotypes the source of the humor, so it almost encourages viewers to laugh at how absurd those preconceived notions really are.
Okay, so it's not afraid to make fun of those cultural differences.
Right.
But it does it in a way that kind of makes you question those differences rather than just reinforcing them.
Exactly. And I think the setting of the film in Atlanta is really important for that dynamic too, because, Atlanta is known for being such a diverse city.
Yeah.
Especially within the African and African-American communities. And I think that setting adds another layer of complexity to those cultural interactions.
For sure.
It's showing this whole spectrum of experiences rather than, just this one view of either culture.
Now, the movie definitely keeps us laughing.
Yeah.
But it also touches on some pretty serious issues, like when Akpos runs into trouble with immigration law.
Oh, yeah.
That felt like a really big moment in the film.
It really was, because that encounter with immigration law, it's not just played for laughs. It actually shows the real anxieties and difficulties that a lot of immigrants experience when they're dealing with a whole new system in another country.
Right.
It brings up things like, visa challenges and cultural misunderstandings and even the fear of being deported.
So it's taking this lighthearted approach, but it's not shying away from the heavier side of what it's like to be an immigrant.
Exactly.
And it makes you wonder if that part of the story really resonated with audiences, especially people who have gone through similar things.
I think that's a huge part of why this movie connected with people on such a personal level, by using humor to talk about these complicated issues.
Yeah.
It creates a space for empathy and understanding, and I think it makes those experiences something that more people can relate to.
That's a good point. We also see this mix of comedy and social commentary in the romantic subplot too.
Right.
Like when Akpos falls for Kimberly, but then her father Odi kind of throws a wrench in things with his opinions about who his daughter should be with.
Yeah, Odi is like the classic overprotective dad.
Yeah.
But he also represents the cultural clashes that can happen a lot in interracial relationships.
Right.
Like his worries about his daughter dating a Nigerian man, whether they're based on prejudice or genuine concern, really reflect how tricky it can be to navigate cultural differences within families.
Oh, definitely. And then there's Clara, the immigration lawyer, who's not fooled by Akpos's charm.
Yeah, she's great.
She seems like a really strong and independent woman who doesn't fall for his, usual tricks.
I think Clara's character is so important because she offers a different perspective than, Akpos' sometimes over-the-top portrayal of Nigerian men.
Yeah.
She's intelligent and driven, and she challenges Akpos's ideas about women and relationships.
I like that.
And their interactions just add this really nuanced layer to how the film explores these cross-cultural dynamics.
Okay, so we've got the comedy, the cultural commentary, the romantic entanglements, but 30 Days in Atlanta, it wasn't just a critical success, it was a huge box office hit. What do you think contributed to that unexpected success?
Well, for one thing, I think it shows how popular Nollywood is becoming. Nollywood is the Nigerian film industry.
Right.
And Nollywood storytelling often features these really lively characters and dramatic plots, and it tends to focus on social issues. All those things are definitely in 30 Days in Atlanta.
And so it's like the film captures that unique Nollywood style and those things that appeal to those audiences, but it also has elements that would appeal to a much bigger audience.
Exactly. And by combining those elements with higher production value and a more polished visual style, 30 Days in Atlanta appealed to both, hardcore Nollywood fans and people who were totally new to Nigerian cinema.
So it's like the film found this perfect balance between, keeping its core audience happy and reaching out to a whole new group of people.
Right.
And speaking of reaching a wider audience, what about the film's impact on how people see African cinema?
I think that's a really good point, because before 30 Days in Atlanta, Nollywood films, even though they were super popular in Africa, they hadn't really made it into the mainstream with international audiences.
Right.
But this movie really changed things. Its success worldwide challenged what people thought about African filmmaking.
Yeah.
And it showed that it could entertain people everywhere.
So it was more than just a hit movie.
Definitely.
It was like a cultural ambassador for Nollywood.
Yeah.
And it opened doors for other filmmakers and stories to be seen by a global audience.
Right. Absolutely. And it did that by using elements that Western audiences were already familiar with, like the romantic comedy genre.
Right.
And that fish out of water idea. But it still kept that unique Nigerian feel to it.
I think that fusion of styles was a big reason why it was so successful. It's like the movie built a bridge between cultures.
Yeah.
And it let audiences see something that was both familiar and new at the same time.
Exactly. And that cross-cultural appeal is made even stronger by the movie's use of comedy.
Yeah.
By using humor to deal with sensitive topics like immigration and cultural differences, it makes people feel more comfortable and more open to the messages the movie is trying to get across.
You said earlier that the film had something to say.
Yeah.
What do you think the filmmakers were trying to tell us with this story?
I think one of the main things they wanted to say is that it's important to be open to different cultures and to challenge the assumptions we have about them. Through Akpos's journey and all his mishaps, the movie encourages us to look past stereotypes and appreciate how rich and complex different cultures really are.
And it does all that without being preachy or overly serious, right?
Exactly.
It's not a lecture on cultural sensitivity. It's a story that makes you laugh and think and maybe even question your own biases.
Exactly. The movie uses humor as a way to promote understanding and start conversations about important social issues. It reminds us that laughter can be really powerful in bringing cultures together and helping people understand each other.
We've talked a lot about the movie's social and cultural importance, but let's not forget that at its heart, 30 Days in Atlanta is a romantic comedy.
True.
What did you think about how the film handled the romantic relationships, especially Akpos going after Kimberly?
I thought the romantic subplot was really clever in how it connected to the bigger themes of cultural identity and societal expectations.
Yeah.
Akpos's crush on Kimberly, at first it seems like he's just attracted to her looks. But it changes as he starts to understand her world and deal with the challenges of their different cultures.
And their relationship isn't exactly smooth sailing, right? Especially with Kimberly's father, Odi, in the picture.
Of course not.
He's definitely a source of a lot of the comedy, but he also represents that real tension that can exist in interracial relationships.
Absolutely. Odi's character, even though he's often portrayed as this comically overprotective dad, he represents the anxieties and prejudices that can pop up in families.
Yeah.
When they're faced with cultural differences, his journey along with Akpos's shows how hard, but also how rewarding it can be to overcome those differences.
We can't leave out Clara, the immigration lawyer.
Right.
She brings this strong female presence to the film. She's not just another love interest.
No, not at all.
She's a complex character with her own goals and ambitions.
Clara is a great example of how the movie breaks away from those stereotypical portrayals of women in romantic comedies.
Okay.
She's smart and independent, and she doesn't fall for Akpos's charm. Their dynamic challenges those traditional gender roles.
And shows a more balanced view of female characters.
You've pointed out so many layers to this film, from its funny moments to its exploration of cultural identity, immigration, and even gender dynamics. What would you say is the most interesting aspect of 30 Days in Atlanta?
For me, it's how the movie manages to mix entertainment and social commentary so well.
Yeah.
It's both funny and makes you think, it makes you laugh, but also reflect and have important conversations about serious topics.
It reminds us that movies can be more than just a way to escape reality.
Right.
They can start dialogues, challenge viewpoints, and ultimately bring people together.
Yeah.
Sounds like 30 Days in Atlanta really did a great job of being entertaining, insightful at the same time. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what really stuck with you about this movie? Was it just a fun way to spend a couple hours, or did it leave you with something more to think about?
For me, it's really how the film uses humor to explore those complicated parts of cultural exchange.
It shows those moments that are kind of awkward and funny and sometimes even frustrating when you have these different worlds colliding, but it does it all with this sense of warmth and understanding.
I totally agree. I loved how it captured that feeling of being a fish out of water.
Right.
Trying to figure out customs and social cues that are totally new to you. It's something that anyone who's traveled or lived in another country can relate to.
Oh, definitely.
What do you think the film ultimately says about the possibility of bridging those gaps between cultures?
I think it's a hopeful message. I think 30 Days in Atlanta shows us that even when there are these cultural differences,
right,
we can still find common ground through experiences. We share empathy and just plain old laughter.
Yeah.
It reminds us that humor can be a really powerful way to break down those barriers and help people connect.
It's like the film is encouraging us to be curious about those cultural differences instead of judging them.
Absolutely.
To find the humor in those awkward situations and to ultimately see that we're all human.
I love that.
And for anyone who wants to check out more Nollywood films after this one, what would you recommend?
Well, if you liked how 30 Days in Atlanta mixed comedy and social commentary, I would definitely recommend looking into the films by Kemi Adetiba.
Go ahead.
She's a director who's known for her sharp wit, her vibrant visuals, and her ability to handle these tough issues with a touch of humor and a whole lot of heart.
Yeah.
Her movie, The Wedding Party, is a great one to start with.
Oh, yeah. I've heard good things about The Wedding Party. I'll have to add that to my list. Well, I think we've officially covered all things 30 Days in Atlanta.
I think so.
From its hilarious cultural clashes to its really heartfelt look at identity and relationships, this film is a true gem. It's funny, but it also gives you something to think about.
Absolutely. It's a movie that shows us that sometimes the best way to connect with people from different cultures is to just laugh together.
And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into 30 Days in Atlanta. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into those stories that really matter.